are literally shaping the planet.
Purpose is the only pathway to a regenerative future.
We have a choice to stay with the status quo or to change.
What is the point of trying to be just resilient when we can actually innovate?
Thank you all so much for the opportunity to participate in this conference. It's a great dialogue on really how sustainability, resiliency, ESG are not only critical to solutions in the built environment and throughout business, but also really on the leading edge of innovation and driving important change for both businesses and consumers alike. So I'll get right into the conversation. And before I go much further, for those of you who aren't familiar with Rubicon, I'll give you a quick overview. So Rubicon is a technology and software company in the waste and recycling industry. We sit at that nexus of the waste generator. So in the case of this conference, it would be the construction sites or the multi-use retail, multi-family, multi-use retail locations, commercial properties, et cetera. All of these entities create some form of waste. And then there's this network of haulers, of companies that then work to dispose of the waste. And so what we do through technology is we really connect those two sides of the equation. We create a marketplace in the middle. And what we try to do differently than a lot of the more traditional legacy type companies is we really have an eye towards a sustainable outcome. And that's why we're really focused on our mission to end waste. So how do we keep that waste, those items that a business, a construction site, et cetera, no longer need? And how do we find a next life for them instead of an end of life? How can we use them as inputs into future supply chains or find recycling options for some of the hardest to find solutions out there? The stats are on the screen, so I won't go through all of them. But one thing that's really important to our business and something that we really pride ourselves on is that we're a certified B Corporation. And so those are businesses that really have committed to using their scale and their business model to not only be a profitable business and create value for its shareholders, but also some societal or environmental benefit along the way. In our case, it is this mission to end waste and also the way that we operate our business. So this concept ESG and business resiliency has really catapulted to the forefront of a lot of the conversations in the business world today. Sustainability professionals like myself are very familiar of these concepts, and they had already started to really rise and they were bubbling to the top of the dialogue in sustainability and investing. But the pandemic, COVID-19 really started to shed light onto how are businesses prepared for the unknown? How are businesses prepared for situations that are out of their control or that really aren't necessarily cogent or specific to the product or service they make? And so pandemics are obviously a great example. It really just threw the entire world on its head, and we're all trying to figure out how to move forward in a very strong manner. Another example of this is climate change, and in our case, it's the massive amount of waste that is being generated and all of the associated challenges that are coming part of that. And so businesses that really integrate sustainability and ESG are performing better because they're agile and they're flexible and they're able to respond to these unknowns. And as the slide in front of you shows, they're being rewarded in the marketplace. So this slide in front of you, it really talks about, it was a study done by Deloitte out of Japan. And this quote is really, I think, very important. COVID-19 is a wake-up call for companies to adopt more sustainable management. And there are three reasons listed here. One is it gives a glimpse into the world where we had not achieved the Sustainable Development Goals. And these are really important environmental objectives, because what they aim to do is to say that as a society, we can advance, we can grow, we can prosper, we can innovate and consume and do all the things that we are really focused on in society, but we need to do it in a sustainable way to really make sure that we're conserving the Earth's resources, and the impact of these practices aren't so detrimental that we end up creating a crisis as a result. And then another really important aspect of this is that these sustainable development goals impact really any business. There are most businesses have 3 or 4 that apply to them. For instance, in the case of Rubicon, there's a few. One of which is responsible consumption, and that is how do we consume and then manage our waste outputs as a result of that. And so I really encourage those who are listening, and really any businesses, to find the SDG goal that resonates with your business, the 2 or 3, and then look to create some plans around those. And I think what you'll find is that they will not only serve as a rallying cry for staff, but they will also focus the business on the ESG topics that are most relevant, and also create targets, objectives, results, et cetera, that will resonate with employees, with investors, and with consumers. So switching a bit to just talk about how Rubicon approaches ESG as a company, and then we'll talk about how we work to help other businesses achieve their objectives related to ESG, specifically and largely in the waste and recycling area. But I mentioned it earlier, we are really committed to this mission to end waste. We're a certified B Corp, and that really imbues itself throughout all of what we do as a company, through the way that we report, the way that we drive our ESG reports, creating SDG commitments, setting targets around circular economy goals, participating in organizations and programs such as the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's new plastic economy that is focused on really reducing single-use plastic, to getting out into the community and volunteering. And as I mentioned earlier, really creating a platform for the local small, medium haulers who typically don't have access to national business because they don't have a national footprint, really empowering them through business and also technology to compete in a competitive marketplace. And so those are just a few examples of what we of how we look at ESG from Rubicon as a company itself. Now, setting the stage for a moment to talk about waste and why it's such a challenge. And I think my guess is many people participating in this session probably understand that, but to help put it in perspective, first and foremost, the waste and recycling industry is very decentralized. So if you have a portfolio of real estate or even one building itself, most of those buildings, almost all of them, have one water input and one water output, one utility they're working with. Same with energy. Waste is different. It is highly decentralized and highly variable. So in the example of water goes in the building, dirty water goes out of the building. Think about all the different waste streams that enter a building: paper, plastic, metal, styrofoam, food, etc. And so those all have their own solutions that have to be addressed. And so that in and of itself creates complexity. Further complicating the situation is that there are approximately 20,000 companies throughout the US that that really service these waste streams. And they all have different reporting, they have different processes, they have different service level agreements, et cetera. And so what we'll talk about a bit more is how Rubicon has really worked to normalize those variables so that the waste generator, which I mentioned earlier, the property manager, the construction site, et cetera, can have a report as streamlined and as unified as they would expect from a water or energy bill. And that's really what I kind of referred to already, but the data is harder to track. And the bills lack uniformity and consistency. They offer different services, and consolidating data really is a challenge. It creates enormous amount of work for businesses that most likely don't want to be spending time on it. And so we've really created a business model and continually refine it so that we can provide that service, so that the businesses that we serve, they can then really free up that manpower to think more strategically about sustainability, more strategically about waste, and more proactively about it, as opposed to simply trying to figure out the baseline, spending most of their time doing that. And then, of course, waste now seems like something that is evident to all of us as a challenge. But really, it's been over the past, let's say 3-4 years, perhaps, that it's catapulted to the front of the sustainability spectrum. And before, there was a lot of focus on energy and water. And of course, there still is focus on that. But we've seen a growing number of commitments around waste, around the circular economy. And if you really know the industry, it makes sense, because there is carbon emissions that come out of landfills, and we'll talk about that a bit more. There is plastic that's really harming marine life and marine health, and there's natural resources that are getting destroyed at a rate that does not need to happen if we just managed our waste and resources that already exist better. So how do we help do that as a company, Rubicon? So the way we look at it is in 3 different segments. So the first segment on the upper left is the 1.0. So really what businesses want or need at the most fundamental level is for their waste and recycling needs to be serviced on time, at a good price, and really within agreed upon service level agreements or understandings. So yeah, businesses don't want waste piling up, they don't want to pay more, et cetera. So Rubicon really has spent a lot of time perfecting how we do that. So how do we actually provide good service? But whereas a lot of companies will just stop there, we start to layer on a lot of sustainability as really part of our mission to end waste. So this 2.0 element of our business is related to zero waste. And that really gained prominence in 2005 when Walmart really sent shockwaves through the business world. And they said we are going to be zero waste to landfill by 2025, and they're about 80% today. It's really impressive what they've done, and they've really coalesced the business world around that through their supply chains and other leadership activities. So this 2.0 world is really about how do you keep materials out of the landfill. You have a choice. It could go into a landfill, and we know they're bad, and we'll talk more about that. Or they could go into some type of beneficial reuse or a circular solution. So what you see in front of you here is some of the things that we do to help think about it. Waste characterizations and mapping, audits. Audits in our business are not looking at financial statements necessarily. They are dumpster diving, figuring out what's in the waste and where the opportunities exist. Where is waste being generated within a building? Helps inform upstream procurement practices and also downstream source separation, and other sustainable outcomes. On the bottom right is just an example of the host of solutions that Rubicon works with, and really again focuses on finding homes for those materials that's not a landfill to the best extent possible, working with the businesses and in context with their goals and objectives. And then the 3.0 is really where the sustainability world is headed when it comes to waste. And that's really achieving the circular economy. And we have a slide on this later, but in a pure circular world, there isn't even the concept of waste. Everything is recirculated. Everything has value, and waste is really treated as a valuable resource for reuse, for remanufacturing, for inputs into supply chains. So this is really the model and mantra that we apply when we look at our partners. And in the middle, you see a lot of the ways that we really think about it. So we have our own team of experts, data, software, and reporting. Hit on that a little bit earlier, but that's really core to understanding what's in the waste stream, where it's being generated, which sites are being generated, which materials have the most value, et cetera. Regulatory insights. Waste is hyper local. It's probably the most localized sustainability topic. There's very little national or cross-state or even statewide standards. That's now changing. There's been some legislation that is being talked about. It's not really at a point where it would be passed, but it's encouraging that there is some talk around unifying some of the standards. But until that happens, we have to know what is happening at the local level. And so that's something that we spend a lot of time on to help make sure that our partners are really making, in line with the local regulations. So how does this matter for business, and why should businesses really be thinking about the circular economy and their waste that they generate? This quote in front of you is one that we really love. The innovation challenge of the century will be to foster prosperity in a world of finite resources. And in a nutshell, what that is referring to is that Earth only has a certain amount of materials to produce things. And if we live in what's called a linear model, where we take a natural resource, we make something, and we throw it away, then we're gonna pretty quickly go through those finite resources when we didn't necessarily have to. So and I alluded to this earlier, but in its purest form, a circular economy generates no waste. We're not there yet, but it is, I think, something that it is achievable in the long run. It's no coincidence that the phrase circular economy has economy in it. Some of the real pioneers of the circular economy, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and Dame Ellen MacArthur out of the UK, they did that intentionally because they, through their studies, have seen significant trillion-dollar growth opportunities through switching towards a circular economy. And so really marrying both the environmental benefit with the economic benefit of a circular economy will allow society to achieve a lot of these objectives and really have this, it's a bit cliche, but this win-win situation. However, along the way, it's very important that Rubicon at least thinks about this in a very actionable way. So what I just mentioned, a lot of what I just mentioned was around some of the aspiration and the theory around circular economy and why it's so good. But what we really do as a company is we we really transcend that aspiration and we convert it into action. And I'm going to go through now some case studies that will really bring that to light. So what's in front of you right now, and we thought this would be really relevant to this audience, is around construction and demolition waste, which is a major source of landfill volume. And as you can see here, in the US alone, the EPA estimates that approximately 530 million tons of construction and demolition waste is generated annually. A majority or a large part of that is going to landfills. It's a cost for businesses themselves and also an environmental cost. And some of the case studies we have will go into some of the solutions that we have around that. And here's the slide right in front of you. So we worked with DAVACO, which is a company that helps to handle fixtures. And what we ended up doing was we collected fixtures from more than 6,700 Starbucks locations. And typically those would go to a landfill. And we thought about what are the intricacies involved in preventing that from happening. There are a lot of different types of metals and materials that have to be separated. And we worked with one of our partners to really convert that metal into recyclables. And through this partnership, and this was a great case study, we donated the fixtures, the rebates to some nonprofits that you can see here. And what's really, I think, important here is you can see on the third bullet that we worked with a partner. And so one of the key concepts or philosophies of Rubicon is that we are a circular economy market maker, because we have access to the businesses that are creating the waste, and then the companies that are looking to grow their business, the non-landfill companies that want to create more and more circular solutions. And so we're connecting all aspects of this marketplace to create this circular economy. Here's another really exciting example, again, about finding homes for really difficult to place items. And in this example, we worked with Chipotle to take the latex gloves from their stores that were typically going to landfills because there wasn't a great solution. And again, in this circular economy market maker example, we worked with them in a local startup out of Arkansas that invented a solution for these gloves. And we were able to convert these gloves into bags that the stores then used to capture the waste and recycling outputs. And so this was a really great example because for a couple of reasons. One, found a non-landfill circular solution for something that's very hard to deal with. Secondly, it created an opportunity for the startup out of Arkansas to have a steady, predictable supply of inputs to grow their business. And then third, it helped achieve Chipotle on its ambition to have 50% diversion rate by 2020. So this is a great example of circular innovation. This example in front of you, this case study with Best Buy, really the meta theme for this is good operations and good fundamentals can have both a financial and a sustainable outcome. And so we Rubicon worked with Best Buy to do things such as optimize and right size the hauling levels so that air wasn't being hauled. So containers were only being removed when they were full enough to meet the DOT road limits. And so that eliminated cost for the hauls that weren't fully optimized. and it removed vehicle miles from the road that were unnecessarily being used. There was also an opportunity to really optimize the way that cardboard was being captured and baled to create the highest value demand in the commodity markets. And so what these really logistical brass tacks examples did was helped us cut cardboard hauling fees and boost diversion rates in the pilot location that we're starting to roll out elsewhere. And so again, a lot of circular and zero waste opportunity is right in front of you. And it just takes some thinking and some partners that can help identify it. This example is an exciting one. As a sustainability professional, I really love it because it's really a organic circular story. So one of our largest customers has about 15,000 locations. They're a variety store chain, and they had a challenge with expired milk that typically was going to the landfill, and not really thought about it much after that. And we worked with them to find a very resilient solution. And so what happened in this example was the milk, instead of going to a landfill, we worked again in this circular economy marketplace example with an upstart Pennsylvania-based dairy farm, Rhineford Farms, to take the milk back because they had installed what's called an anaerobic digester on their farm. And that is a form of biogas. Essentially, it intentionally recreates a landfill environment and captures the methane to then converts into natural gas. So this farm was providing a lot of its energy needs through this anaerobic digester. And these things have needs for inputs to help create the fuel. So we worked through the operations, logistics, and created this organic circular example that took the expired milk, put it into the anaerobic digester, or AD, and then it created energy for the farm. So that's a very exciting example. Now, coming back for a moment to C&D, is we worked with the Atlanta Hawks, and they did a huge renovation in Atlanta. And typically, the C&D waste, as we just mentioned, goes to the landfill, and that's because a lot of the materials are commingled. They have a lot of different material streams, et cetera. But that was something the Atlanta Hawks did not want to do. They have an aspiration to be the most sustainable sports team and arena in the NBA. And so what we did was we found a solution that for the seats, and that was one of the hardest parts, that separated the different material streams from the seats, found new homes for those, and kept them out of the landfill. So as I wrap up here, just wanted to talk a moment about the future and why waste is so important to a resilient future, a more sustainable recovery, and why businesses really should be focusing on it. And these are three reasons why waste can be so detrimental. On the upper left, and this is very relevant to this audience, landfills and waste services are a third of the greenhouse gas emissions from the commercial sector. And people may think, whoa, how is that the case? And that's because landfills are the third largest industrial emitter of methane gas. And methane gas is 30% more potent to our atmosphere than the carbon that comes out of our automobiles. So for companies that are trying to achieve their greenhouse gas goals, waste is definitely an opportunity from that point of view alone. There's the wastewater intersection. Most of us have seen pictures of the Great Pacific Ocean patch, 2 times the size of Texas, plastic just floating out in the Pacific. That the ocean is essentially dead around it. No marine life can survive, and other reasons around waste in our freshwater sources, et cetera. So that's something that's really a challenge, particularly around single-use plastics that have no real market, no real value, and are very difficult to recycle. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the quote around natural resources, there's something called Earth Overshoot Day. And that marks the day when society's demand for ecological resources and services in a given year exceeds what Earth can regenerate in that year. And we passed that in August. So essentially everything that we are using from the Earth for production, services, et cetera, is on borrowed time. So move the date means let's move it, so that it happens on December 31st, so that we're using in a year what the Earth can regenerate. And this goes back really specifically to the circular economy, because if you live in a linear economy where it's so easy just to throw something away, then we really won't use the materials that we've already extracted for future use, and the only alternative will be to harvest other natural resources. So in closing, it's a time for collective action. We've all been hearing that, and ultimately, I mentioned it earlier with the SDGs. I think every business can be a part of the solution. Obviously, waste is what we spend all of our time on, but there could be other areas. But ultimately, if businesses can find those few areas in any of the ESG aspects, then the collective might of all of us will be very impactful, and we'll be able to have a sustainable outcome. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll just remind, perfect. I just to remind everyone, if you have questions for David, please drop them in the Slack channel. There's some conversations going on there. We're going to be breaking here for just a couple of minutes until 3:45. But right now there is a keynote happening in the design channel, or excuse me, the design track. So I will drop that in the chat, and we will reconvene at 3:45. So thanks again, David.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for everyone listening. My email is up on the screen. Feel free to reach out. Thank you all. Appreciate it.